The census cancellation, a glimpse into Putin's Russia. Vladimir Putin's recent decision to cancel the 2029 census speaks volumes about the state of affairs in Russia. This move is not just a bureaucratic decision. It is a strategic maneuver that reveals much about the current political climate and the lengths to which the Kremlin will go to maintain control. Official data is already scarce. The lack of transparency in governmental operations has been a growing concern for years, and the cancellation of the census only exacerbates this issue. Independent sources paint a bleak picture. Reports from non-governmental organisations and independent journalists suggest that the situation on the ground is far more dire than official statements would have the world believe. Putin, it seems, would rather hide the truth than confront it. His administration has consistently shown a preference for controlling the narrative rather than addressing the underlying issues. This act of obfuscation has sent shockwaves through Russian society and beyond. Citizens are increasingly aware of the disconnect between the government's portrayal of reality and their lived experiences. It is a clear indication that the Kremlin is deeply concerned about the country's demographic trajectory. Declining birth rates, increasing mortality rates, and emigration are all factors that the government would prefer to keep under wraps. The census, a vital tool for understanding a nation's population, has become a casualty of Putin's tightening grip on information. Without accurate data, it becomes nearly impossible to address the social and economic challenges facing the country. By suppressing data, the Kremlin seeks to control the narrative, even if that narrative is increasingly at odds with reality. This manipulation of information is a hallmark of authoritarian regimes. This move has been met with skepticism and concern from demographers and economists who rely on accurate data to assess the health of a nation. The lack of reliable statistics hampers their ability to provide informed analysis and recommendations. The cancellation of the census is just the latest example of the Kremlin's efforts to silence dissent and manipulate information. This pattern of behavior has been evident in various aspects of Russian governance, from media control to political repression. Independent media outlets have been shuttered. The space for free and independent journalism has been shrinking rapidly, leaving citizens with fewer sources of unbiased information. Journalists and activists have been harassed, imprisoned, or worse. The risks associated with speaking out against the government are higher than ever, creating a climate of fear and self-censorship. In Putin's Russia, truth is a dangerous commodity. Those who seek to uncover and disseminate it often find themselves facing severe consequences. The decision to cancel the census is not merely an attempt to hide embarrassing statistics. It is a calculated move to maintain control over the flow of information, and by extension, the populace. It is a reflection of a deeper malaise, a fear of transparency and accountability that has come to define Putin's regime. This fear drives many of the government's actions, from media suppression to the manipulation of public data. By suppressing information, the Kremlin hopes to maintain its grip on power, even as the foundations of that power begin to crumble. The long-term sustainability of such a strategy is questionable, but for now, it appears to be the path the Kremlin has chosen. The roots of Russia's crisis go back 30 years. The country reached peak population in 1994 with 149 million people. The total has since zigzagged downwards. It was 145 in 2021. That figure from the UN excludes the 2.4 million people of Crimea, which Russia illegally annexed and depopulated the Ukrainian population, and replaced them with Russian citizens in 2014 and incorporated into its national accounts. According to 2023 UN projections, the total could be just 120 million in 50 years if current patterns persist. That would make Russia the 15th most populous country in the world, down from 6th in 1995. Population decline is not unique to Russia. Most post-communist states have seen dips, though not like this. Their declines have been slow, but also manageable. Russia's population in recent decades has seen a precipitous slump, then a partial recovery, thanks to a period of high immigration from parts of the ex-Soviet Union and more generous child allowances after 2007, followed by a renewed fall. According to the State Statistics Agency in 2020 and 2021, combined the country's population declined by 1.3 meters. Deaths outstripped births by 1.7 meters. The decline was largest among ethnic Russians, whose number, the census of 2021 said, fell by 5.4 in 2010 to 21. Their share of the population fell from 78% to 72%. So much for the indicted war criminal Putin's boast to be expanding the Ruski Mir, Russian world. As of the 2021 census, the population of Russia was 147.2 million. It is the most populous country in Europe and the 9th most populous country in the world, with a population density of 8.5 inhabitants per square kilometre, 22 inhabitants SQMI. As of 2020, the overall life expectancy in Russia at birth was 71.54 years, 66.49 years for males, and 76.43 years for females. From 1992 to 2012, and again since 2016, Russia's death rate has exceeded its birth rate, which has been called a demographic crisis by analysts. Consequently, the nation has an aging population, with the median age of the country being 40.3 years. In 2009, Russia recorded annual population growth for the first time in 15 years. During the mid-2010s, Russia had seen increased population growth due to declining death rates, increased birth rates, and increased immigration. Between 2020 and 2021, prior to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Russia's population had undergone its largest peacetime decline in recorded history due to excess deaths from the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition, at least 1 million Russians fled the country as a result of the invasion. All this began before the war and reflects Russia's appalling COVID pandemic. The official death toll from the disease was 388,091, which would be relatively low. But The Economist estimates total excess deaths in 2023 at between 1.2 and 1.6 million. That would be comparable to the number in China and the United States, which have much larger populations. Russia may have had the largest COVID death toll in the world after India, and the highest mortality rate of all, with 851 to 100 deaths per 100,000 people. If you add pandemic mortality to the casualties of war and the flight from mobilization, Russia lost between 1.9 and 2.8 people in 2023 on top of its normal demographic deterioration. That would be even worse than during the disastrous early 2000s, when the population was falling by roughly 500,000 a year. What might that mean for Russia's future? Demography is not always destiny. And Russia did for a while begin to reverse its decline in the mid-2010s. The impact of population change is often complex, as Russia's military mobilization shows. The decline in the number of ethnic Russians of call-up age, which is being raised from 1827 to 2130, will make it harder for the armed forces to carry out the regular autumn draft, which begins in October 2024, and Russia may not achieve what enables other countries to grow richer as they age: high and rising levels of education. Nicholas Eberstadt, a demographer at the American Enterprise Institute in Washington, argues that the country presents a peculiar combination of third world mortality and first world education. It has some of the highest rates of educational attainment among over 25s in the world. But the exodus of well-educated young people is eroding this advantage. According to the Communications Ministry, 10% of its workers left the country in 2022. Many were young men. Their flight is further skewing Russia's unbalanced sex ratio, which in 2021 meant there were 121 females older than 18 for every 100 males. The demographic doom loop has not, it appears, diminished Putin's craving for conquest, but it is rapidly making Russia a smaller, worse educated and poorer country from which young people flee and where men die in their 60s. The invasion has been a human catastrophe, and not only for Ukrainians. This explains what Putin wants to hide: a democratic catastrophe and time bomb. The population no longer has the younger generation base to support the older generations in taxation and pensions. The state will have to provide for a significant and expanding cost of supporting retired and aging Russians. This has already led to diminishing pensions and a lack of social and medical care for aging people in Russia. Independent media outlets have been shuttered. The space for free and independent journalism has been shrinking rapidly, leaving citizens with fewer sources of unbiased information. The other problem now manifesting itself is the mass shortage of young, skilled workers, leading to companies competing with each other for skilled workers. And as salaries rise to meet this competition, so too begins the inflationary cycle of higher prices for goods and services and higher wages to maintain the working population. The effects of Russia's illegal war in Ukraine are profound in 2024, with average Russian casualty rates now exceeding 1,000 young men every day being slaughtered in Ukraine, while Putin, like Hitler in his final days, hides away in a bunker and surrounds himself with a large personal army to protect his life from Russian citizens. They have borne the cost of Putin's war and failed attempts to rebuild a Russian empire through conquests with his neighbors, an ambition set to fail as the world coalesces around Ukraine in support, albeit at a fractured and incomplete level of military support. Putin's regime has attempted to mitigate the democratic time bomb in a number of ways. Firstly, he has mass abducted and kidnapped tens of thousands of Ukrainians who he has sought to Russify and integrate into his falling population. The regime has, during 2024, now begun to push out strategies that condemn and demonize childless families, and they have encouraged females to have up to 10 children to save the country. The regime is also encouraging young females from school age to fall pregnant instead of pursuing careers. In September 2023, the regime implemented large-scale financial bonuses and incentives for Russian women to give birth. From preferential mortgages to financial rewards. In October 2024, the State Duma, in a state of panic and desperation, took the extraordinary step of criminalizing the act of family planning and discouraging birth. And on October 1, 2024, Putin decreed the banning of further population censuses to hide the deadly truth of his population and economic mismanagement of the country. He is an autocratic and murderous thug, sending hundreds of thousands of Russians to their death in Ukraine. And this has caused irreparable harm to the country's demographics, which will plague the country economically for the next 100 years.
Has this content been useful to you? Would you like to see more research and translation content from Beefeater fella? If you do, and you want to stay up to date with my work, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel now. It takes just a few seconds and it's free. This is really important. Your support and recommendations can make a big difference to the channel.
Years. Russia's demographic decline, a ticking time bomb. Russia's demographic crisis is not a new phenomenon. It has been a persistent issue that has plagued the nation for many years, casting a long shadow over its future. For decades, the country has been grappling with low birth rates and high mortality rates. This dual challenge has created a demographic imbalance that is difficult to rectify. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 exacerbated these trends, leading to a period of profound social and economic upheaval. The transition from a planned economy to a market economy was tumultuous, causing widespread uncertainty and hardship. The once mighty Soviet population, it seemed, was shrinking before the world's eyes. The decline was not just in numbers, but also in the spirit and morale of the people. Russia's total fertility rate, the average number of children born to a woman over her lifetime, has been below the replacement level of 2.1 for decades. This persistent low fertility rate is a significant factor in the population decline. In 2023, it hovers around 1.5, far below the levels needed to sustain a population over the long term. This low fertility rate is a clear indicator of the challenges facing Russian families today. This means that, barring a significant change in demographic trends, Russia's population will continue to decline for the foreseeable future. The sight of empty playgrounds and abandoned homes is becoming increasingly common. The implications of this decline are profound. A shrinking population affects every aspect of society, from the economy to the social fabric. A shrinking population means a smaller workforce, which in turn leads to slower economic growth. This economic stagnation can create a vicious cycle, further discouraging young people from starting families. It also means an aging population, which places a greater strain on social welfare systems. The healthcare system in particular is under immense pressure to cater to the needs of an increasingly elderly population. Russia's demographic crisis is not just a problem for the future, it is a clear and present danger to the country's long-term stability and prosperity. The government is acutely aware of this issue, but solutions have been elusive. The causes of Russia's demographic decline are complex and multifaceted. They are deeply rooted in the country's history and socio-economic conditions. They include economic insecurity, declining living standards, and a lack of optimism about the future. These factors create an environment where starting a family is seen as a risky endeavor. Many young Russians simply do not see a bright future for themselves in their own country. The sense of disillusionment is palpable, and it manifests in various forms, including protests and social unrest. They are emigrating in droves, seeking opportunities and a better life elsewhere. This brain drain further exacerbates the demographic crisis, as the country loses some of its most talented and ambitious individuals. Addressing this demographic time bomb requires comprehensive and sustained efforts from the government, including economic reforms, social policies, and incentives to encourage higher birth rates. As long as the autocratic and murderous reign of Putin continues, this bomb will continue to approach a catastrophic economic explosion. It will tear the country apart irreparably and lead to enormous social upheaval and devastation. The war in Ukraine fueling the demographic fire. The war in Ukraine, launched by Putin in February 2022, has had a devastating impact on Russia's demographics. The conflict has not only reshaped the geopolitical landscape, but has also left a deep scar on the social fabric of Russia. Tens of thousands of Russian soldiers have been killed. These losses are not just numbers. They represent the lives of young men who were the future of the nation. Hundreds of thousands more have been wounded. The physical and psychological toll on these soldiers is immense, with many facing long-term disabilities and trauma. The war has also led to a mass exodus of young Russians fleeing conscription. This brain drain is stripping the country of its brightest minds and most capable individuals. The Kremlin has gone to great lengths to conceal the true cost of the war from the Russian people. State-controlled media paints a distorted picture, hiding the grim reality of a population decline. As of October 2024, the unofficial birth numbers totaled 13,291,470 versus total deaths of 15,996,019. This is an ultra-conservative figure, suggesting the deficit is approaching 2 million people per year, and then you need to factor in mass emigration as people flee from conscription. The demographic impact is undeniable. The population decline is stark, with fewer children being born and an aging population that cannot sustain the future workforce. The war is draining Russia of its most valuable resource, its people. The loss of young, productive citizens is a blow from which the country may struggle to recover. The war has also had a profound psychological impact on Russian society. The constant state of conflict and uncertainty has left many feeling hopeless and anxious about the future. The constant barrage of propaganda, the suppression of dissent, and the ever-present threat of repression have created an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. People are afraid to speak out, and this stifles any potential for positive change. In such an environment, it is little wonder that many Russians are choosing to postpone or forgo having children altogether. The future seems too uncertain to bring new life into the world. The war in Ukraine is not just a geopolitical disaster for Russia, it is a demographic catastrophe. The long-term consequences of this conflict will be felt for generations. It is accelerating the country's population decline, exacerbating its economic woes and deepening its social divisions. The ripple effects of this war are vast, affecting every aspect of Russian life. That's a wrap for this video. Thank you for taking the time to watch it. You can see an in-depth research post with full references and links on the A-thread I have posted on Twitter. Please visit my Twitter account, which is at Beefeater_fella, and find all of my daily updates and research threads published on Twitter. Thank you and have a great day.